So last week we were talking together, Michael and I were talking about serving. And this week we're going to talk about something else, and we'll get into that in just a minute. But I think one of the things that people misunderstood about serving, what serving is all about, okay? And I don't want to leave you with the wrong idea. Because here's a question you need to ask yourself, and that is this. If tomorrow, for some reason, this church closed its doors, would the community recognize that we were gone? Because if a church closes its doors, and nobody recognizes that they've ever left, we haven't done our job. We have not impacted the community that God has called us to serve in. And that's what community, we talked about community. Community is in the church. When they first started, they started out with community churches. You had a church of Ephesus. You had a church of Laodicea. You had a church of Thyatira, and every town had their churches. They didn't go by the name of Baptist, Pentecostal, Holiness, American Baptist, Southern Baptist, United Methodist, Central Methodist. They didn't have a name. They were the church. And they met in homes until they got too big. And then they started having to build bigger buildings to house them all. And so the question arises is that if we're not missed, then what are we here for? Because we're here for more than just serving ourselves too, okay? And we'll talk about some of the things about impacting there. And before we go, it's just, for instance, I got a call this week. Central Connections, I don't know how many of y'all know about Central Connections in Middletown and the things that they offer a lot of times to seniors and stuff. And so they just got a brand new person that is a wellness coordinator for the Central Connections on Central Avenue is where they're at. And they're getting together what they're going to call a wellness seminar and offering services to seniors. And she called me up and she says, hey, I was looking and searching for someone that can handle grief among seniors. And I noticed that you guys have this. Would you do me a favor? Would you come and speak to us about this and how what you guys offer can not just go to children or middle adults, but let's talk about seniors. Seniors who have been together, married together for 45, 50 years, and all of a sudden they lose their partner, their best friend. How do they deal with that? What do they do? How can we minister to them and share with them in their journey of grief? The same way we share with those who have cancer and sharing in theirs. and walking alongside of them and not just leaving them alone and saying, well, you know, you're going to die in 5 years anyway. And do you know that? They may outlive each and every one of us. We don't know. And so they did that. And then I had a guy walking down the street this week. Never seen the guy in my life. And he says, hey, Pastor, how you doing? I'm going to come to your church. I said, where do you live? I haven't seen you. He says, oh, I just live down the street here. He says, but I've heard about you guys. I said, who'd you hear from? He says, my drinking buddy. Cool. We're in the bars and we don't even go to them. And we're partying with people we don't even know you're partying with them. So are we making an impact? Absolutely. Absolutely. But there's more to it. I have a video. This one I made sure that it worked before I'm showing it. So if it doesn't work, blame technology.
So my name is Jeff. I've been a churchgoer my whole life, but for a large portion of the early part of my life, it really felt much more of like a family obligation than something I was really invested in. And at the time, I was a little countercultural. I was a skateboarder, I was a snowboarder, I was into punk rock, and I really didn't think that there was ever going to be an opportunity for me to connect with people, with Christians, who were like me, who I could really see eye to eye on a lot of things. And it wasn't until I was introduced to that group of folks that you know, I was really able to see church as something that's much more important than just a building to go to every Sunday. That it was really a community, a body of folks who lifted each other up and laughed and cried together. And that really put me on a track to solidifying the importance of being part of a Christian community. So my first job out of college was working for a financial advisory firm. And it was a traditional financial advisory firm in a lot of ways, with a little twist, and that is that it was a Christian firm in which we went around the country and taught others about stewardship, which in a lot of ways was a new concept for me. And I remember thinking that, you know, even though I understand now what stewardship's all about, I don't have a great understanding for whether or not I'm actually practicing it. In fact, I knew I probably wasn't practicing it really well. There was a distinct moment in my life when I was 23 years old, and I'm laying in bed full of anxiety, and it's because right before I went to bed, I looked at my bank statement and saw that I had $62 left for myself and my wife, and left for us to live on over the next week or so. And I realized I just didn't know what I was doing. And the fact of the matter is that I tried to control every aspect of my financial life, and it just was not working. I was screwing up. I had no idea what I was doing. And so I'm laying there in bed, full of anxiety, grinding my teeth, unable to sleep. And suddenly I kind of throw my arms up and just say, all right, Lord, listen, I don't know what I'm doing. I need you to help me out here. And there was a distinct moment of peace there where I felt a distinct message of, okay, well, I just got to stop doing it my way. You know, it struck me funny at that time that I'm sitting there all day counseling people on biblical stewardship and ironically not practicing it myself. And that was really the aha moment for me, where I really committed to learning what practicing financial stewardship looked like for me and my wife. When I reflect upon that night a dozen years ago, where I finally gave up control, and I've seen how much I've grown since then, and I've seen how God has worked through that, it's so clear to me that it's critical that I impart that onto my children. I try to be intentional with my kids about taking them through exercises like this one little thing that we do with quarters, having conversations with them about what giving of your time and your money and your talents is all about, and bringing it all back to the fact that everything that we receive is a gift from God, and we honor Him in giving a portion of that back. I'm so thankful for the church that God has placed me in, and a community that supports that church, and the amazing relationships that I have with so many folks there. But probably more so, I'm so thankful for the radical way that God has changed my heart and my priorities.
One of the things that we need to understand is that some people are already saying, okay, so what's he doing today? Where's he going with this thing? And so I have a trunk up here, and it just says treasure chest. Now my grandkids and others, like Mark, know exactly what this chest has in it, okay? But I hope that by the end of the service, that what's in this chest is going to be replaced by a bunch of love. And we'll share with you where it's at. How many of you all growing up ever had a hope chest? All right. So for those of you that had a hope chest, you basically understood that as you were growing up, somebody would actually place something in there. And later on, when you got married or you moved away, basically a lot of times it was for when you got married, on your wedding night or after your wedding night, when you got there into your first home or first apartment or wherever you were staying, you would open up that hope chest, and in there would be all of these really neat things that people had given to you over the years. It may have been a blanket or a quilt, maybe that your grandmother had quilted for you. Like for instance, my wife, her mother quilted. Her mother also made her dresses. And so a lot of times after she would make the dress, she would have some material left over, and she would take that material and she would make these quilts. So when my mother-in-law died, we got the quilt. And I started looking at that quilt and remembering, and my wife too said, remember that dress that I had on? This material? And we started going back and reliving memories from like 20 and 30 years back of when we were dating, or where she wore that dress to prom. And just the good times that we shared and things, and all of those things that are there. Or maybe your grandmother had this antique bowl or an antique china, or just some old things that they had placed in there. And you go back and you look in those treasure chests, and that treasure chest, when you open it up, it brings back a lot of these things, you know, that were there. And so when you understand that what they were doing was they were taking whatever they had and they were sacrificing it by giving it to you. And later on, you would use it and you would remember whatever it was that was in that chest. And you relived a lot of stuff. So we hang on to those treasures because, and we don't hang on to them for the pleasure of hoarding. okay? There are sometimes, like for instance, you got an old broken down saw or an old broken down car. I would say an old broken down body, but you don't want to get rid of that. But you got certain things that they break down. They're irreparable. But you just hang on to them because you think, you know what? One of these days I'm going to get around to fixing it. And then all of a sudden, when it comes time to clean out the garage, you start looking at this stuff and you're thinking, why did I keep this? Why do I keep that? It's like the next thing you know, you're calling 1-800-GOT-JUNK and saying, can you do me a favor? Can you come clean out my garage for me? And just haul it away. In actuality, what they really need to do is take and jack up the garage, put it on a trailer, and just take the whole thing to the dump and dump it. You know, but you don't do that because they don't bring the garage back. So yeah, you can hoard these things, but these things that we get out of these treasure chests, we don't get them to hoard them. We get them because of the memories that they have. They're not broken. They mean an awful lot to us, and so we continue to go through those things, okay? Every once in a while, when you're going through those treasure chests that your grandmother or your grandfather or somebody gave you, maybe, for instance, you might find a change purse that they had. And in that change purse, you found an antique coin. And you start asking yourself, wonder how much that's worth. Wonder how about if I go get that appraised and see how much? And failing to realize that maybe your grandmother, your grandfather, or somebody left you this dime. And all you thought it was a dime. Until all of a sudden you found out that that dime or that stamp, which didn't really mean much to you, all of a sudden can be worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. Or a stamp that was a mistake, and they only printed out like 3 or 4 of them, or one sheet, and that's all it was. And now you got them, and they're worth millions of dollars. But it was just a dime. What do you do with it? I would sell it. I can still remember the dime. I can take a picture. I'm just being honest. But what happens is you put it in the box, and they put it in the box because they thought that later on you would pull it out, somebody would, and it would be a memory for them. And it would help them in some way. Okay? Now, why I'm saying that is because this was the concept of the early church. And we're going to show you how the early church gave, not in hoarding, but gave to give memories to people. So if you got your Bible, go to Acts chapter 4, and we're going to read verses 32 through 35. So it's up on the screen. I put it in white so it's a little bit easier to read. The black was terrible. So I changed it to make it easier for you to get it. So Acts chapter 4, starting at verse number 32 and going through verse number 35. Here's what it says. Now the multitude of those who believed were of one heart and soul. And no one said that any of his possessions was his own, but instead they held everything in common. With great power, the apostles were given testimony to the resurrection of the Lord Jesus, and great grace was on all of them. There was not a needy person among them, because all those who owned lands or houses sold them, brought the proceeds of the things that were sold, and laid them at the apostles' feet. This was then distributed to each person as anyone had a need. And so you begin to start reading and start understanding what it is that they're trying to say here. Because so many times this scriptures, and when you start talking about giving, everybody thinks, okay, here we go. They're always asking us for money and stuff. But we're not. I got another clip that I'd like to show you about how a little cartoon or a little movie that maybe your grandkids or your kids have watched, and maybe some of you adults have not watched, but you really should watch this movie about Finding Nemo. There is a really good part in this movie that is very appropriate, and it's just called Mine, Mine, Mine.
All right, Gerald, what is it? Fish got your tongue? Love a duck!
I gotta find my son Nemo!
Nemo? Hey, he's that fish, you know, the one we've been talking about, the one that's been fighting the whole ocean. Hey, I know where your son is. Huh? Hey, wait! They're coming back! Stop!
Keep going! He's crazy!
I got something to tell you!
Mine.
Okay, don't make any sudden moves. Hop inside my mouth if you want to live.
Hop in your mouth, huh? And how does that make me live?
Mine?
Because I can take you to your son.
Yeah, right.
No, I know your son. He's orange, he's got a gimpy fin on one side.
That's Nemo!
Fasten your seatbelts! Everybody hold on!
Mine.
Kind of sound familiar? Next video. No. Because a lot of times what happens is we've got things that we could give away, but we don't. We hang on to them. That's mine. That's mine. That's mine. I really, I don't need it, but it's mine. You need it? No, I'm sorry, it's mine. And this is what was happening. Here was the two little fish, and every one of those seagulls were fighting over that fish, all saying, mine, mine. They were going to kill each other to get a meal, saying it was mine, and never going to share. And when you find this, these seagulls, they were just calling out over top of each other, and they kept hollering, mine, 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 mine. And so if you ever haven't watched Finding Nemo, y'all need to watch it, okay? It's cool. It'll teach you some lessons, okay? So, first thing we need to understand is that sometimes this is what we sound like to God. No, this is mine. No, this is mine. No, this is mine. And God said, really? Whose is it? Oh, it's mine. Really? Yeah, it's mine. Did you make it? Oh, yeah, it's mine. Did you do this? Oh, yeah, it's mine. This is my creation. Failing to realize, And so what do we got to do if we're going to understand this? And the first thing it is you got to release your grip. Okay? Remember how people would always talk about somebody and saying they are such a tightwad, that I guarantee you they've got the first dollar that they've ever earned, and they still haven't released it. And it's still there. But here's what the Bible says. In Acts chapter 4, in verse number 32, now the multitude of those who believed were of one heart and soul, and no one said that any of his possessions was his own, but instead they held everything in common. Or another version says, not one of them claimed that anything belonging to his was his own. The first church had a loose grip. They didn't claim that everything that they had was theirs, any of it. So, for those of you that are quick to say, well, they just didn't have a lot, so it was easy for them to have a looser grip, you need to go back and remember the story of Ananias and Sapphira. They had some piece of property. Let's just say, for instance, they had a piece of property that was maybe 40 acres. And that 40 acres was sitting there doing nothing but weeds growing up. They never really did anything with it. It just sat there. It was their property. See, I'm a great property owner. I've got my house sitting on 30 acres and I've got this other 40 acres, so I'm a great property owner. I have 70 acres of land. I don't really need the 70 acres of land. I've got these 40s that I don't need. And so they saw how everybody was giving, and they decided, oh, hey, cool, they're being blessed, so here's what we're going to do. Let's sell the 40 acres. They've sold the 40 acres and they got a good price out of it. So Ananias comes in to them, and they're there, and he says, here's the share to y'all that I got for this land. And he says, really? You got how much? Oh, we got this much. And he said, Ananias, you lied. And because of that, God is going to strike you dead. And guess what happened? He died. And his wife thought, well, hold on, man, where's he at? And she comes in. They ask her the same question, how much did you get? And she says, oh, well, this is how much we got. And they said, don't you understand that you lied? And that the men who have carried the feet of your husband away are right now waiting to take you away too. And guess what happened? She died. Because why? Mine. It's all mine. And he says you've got to understand about releasing the grip. Now, let me say this to y'all. Some of y'all are looking at me like saying, yeah, you have no clue what you're talking about. This sermon is as hard for me sometimes as it is for you. Okay? A couple of y'all were here when this event happened. There was a couple that came to the church having a need. They were looking for a job. They had a job, but they didn't have transportation. And I had a vehicle sitting in my house. Just sitting in my house. Actually, it was, yeah, I think you were living in the house at the time, because I never brought it to the new house because I couldn't sit it in the driveway, and I couldn't sit it on the street, so I left it out there. And so anyway, I had this truck. And you know how many times I've wanted that truck back? But one day they came into church on a Wednesday night, and they told us they knew somebody, and they told us they had a need, so I talked it over with Diana, and I said, hey, this truck's sitting there, we're not moving it, it's not moving, it's not doing anything, it's just sitting out there, so how about if we just give them the truck? So we did. We gave them the truck, the title, everything. We gave them the whole thing. Did I ever see them again? No. They got the truck, but I never saw them. They never came back. They really didn't appreciate it. Now, there could have been somebody in the church that could have needed it. I didn't know, didn't really care. But you know how many times Satan brings that back up to me? Remember, you needed a truck to move this from your house? I just had the engine rebuilt. Didn't have any rust on it. Still ran fine. Had a couple of dents in it. But that was it. And Satan every once in a while will come back and say, you know what? Remember that truck? You know how much money you could have gotten out of that truck, but you gave it away? And every once in a while Satan plays a game that says, you gave it away? How stupid can you be? And he does these games. And he'll do the games to you. And every once in a while, somebody says, well, I need something, and that's good. That's fine. What do you do? Every once in a while, ladies and gentlemen, we've got to learn to lose grips of things. Last week, a group came in here called the Crownsmen, right? I think it was last Sunday night. Some of y'all were here, right? So I'm right, that's who it was? Cool. Okay. So they go back in the back and they see this subwoofer sitting back there, and it's been sitting back there because we have no space to put this stuff. And so it's sitting there. And they said, hey, this guy is looking for this subwoofer because the one that he had didn't work. And I said, really? I said, he says, how much you want for it? And I said, tell the guy to call me, come down, and I'll talk to him, and he can have it. Okay? Somebody say, well, you could have sold that. Really? And got what? So let me tell you what happened. Tell you the rest of the story. Many of you that weren't here, you didn't hear the testimony of the young lady. Really not a young lady. Her name is Carla. I forget her last name now. I want to say Lawson, but I'm not sure. But anyway, I met Carla a while back, and I also know her niece, which is the secretary over at Edgewood, who just lost her husband, Ray, that would come around here all the time. Real good friend of ours. Carla had sold him, this guy that was looking for the subwoofer, the whole set, the speakers and the subwoofer. And she was talking about her story, you know, of stuff, and she and I were talking about some things. And I did not know that she had sold this to this guy, and she did not know that the subwoofer did not work. So here's how God works. The guy comes and he picks it up. He calls back to Carla or Marla and tells her, she texts me and she says, I can't believe how God used that whole concert last Sunday night to touch the lives of multitudes of people in a circle. That none of us knew that this guy had a need for something, because why? He does this as a Christian radio. And it was helping his Christian radio program with something that was sitting back here that we weren't using. And it went full circle. She said, I really felt bad because I sold him something that I didn't know didn't work. But yet, I met you and we came to your church, and God, through all of that, worked to meet the need of someone else that you didn't even know. So now we're best friends on Facebook. Add to another. Because sometimes, ladies and gentlemen, you got to learn to release the grip. You can hoard, you can stay there all of the time, and even the church can begin to do this. Okay? But I want you to understand something. This is not a simple message of give it to the church. This is not the standard message that everybody talks about when they say, okay, now he's talking about giving, and what he's going to do is he's going to basically talk to us about how we need to give this money and how we need to give that money and do this and do that and all of these other things. And that is not what it is. This is a way that you're going to be able to show your love that you have. And this is where we need to understand. Because when we begin to think that the church is all about lawns and curriculum, we've missed the point. I was talking to a pastor yesterday, and he was saying, we've got a financial issue in our church. And I said, what's going on? He says, we've lost 3 families in our church, and they were giving 25% of all of the money that's coming into the church in those 3 families. And he said, so here's the problem. He says, we went back and we looked, 66% of our money is going to salaries of the employees of the church. And he says, what do I do? And I said, fire them all. I said, if you're taking 66% of the church's money to go to your guys' salary, he says, I don't get one. It's this other one. And I said, you need to talk to that other and say, hey, you got to do something. You got to do something. Because it's a bad steward to take the money of the church and use it for salaries. Because how in the world can you reach anybody? You need the funds to do those things. And if you're spending 66% of the budget on salaries, it's the wrong place. And if you're spending 66% of the church's budget on salaries and making the lawn look good, you're missing something. It can be a nicely manicured lawn, but it's not reaching people. The priority needs to understand, you've got to release the grip to be able to move things out. Second thing is you've got to tighten your belt. Because there's some times that you need to, and this is one of the things that certain people don't understand about this church, and that is this. Any money that comes into this church at the end of the month, we calculate how much it is. And 10% of the money taken into this church goes back out. There's a percentage that goes to the state cooperative program, which basically helps churches all around the world. There's another percentage that goes back into what the association that we are part of called Miami Valley, which is 7 churches right now, and it helps those 7 churches. There are some churches right now that are about ready to close because financially they can't afford anything. They're dying. The rest of the money comes back into this church because basically 5% of all of it goes to help others. 5% of it comes back into this church to help people within this church that have needs. But we just don't hand it out. And we just don't give it away. A church, please understand this, a church is not here to pay someone's utility bill. A church is not here to pay someone's phone bill or cable bill. That is not what the church is here for. May I say this to y'all? You don't need a cell phone. You don't need cable TV. But you might need food to eat that we can help you with. But there's strings attached to it. And that is, let us help you get out of this financial bind that you're in to help you. We offer that to you. Because if we don't offer that to you, here's what's going to happen. Same thing that happened to Jesus. Jesus fed the 5,000. They came back the next day. Jesus saw them coming back and said, I know what you're coming back for. You want me to feed you? You want me to do this again? I'm not doing it. Not doing it. And so many times, you don't understand how many phone calls I get from the community of Middletown that says, hey, our electricity is about ready to get cut off. Can you help us? And I'll ask them, do you go to church? No. Then why are you calling us? Because we need someone to help us. That is not what the church is here to do. The church is here to help the people within the church. Within the church, within the family. How many of you all invite somebody from outside to come to your house to eat? Not very often. But the problem is sometimes what we want to do is we want to hold on to the money and not release it. We want to tighten the grip for the things that we want it to do and things that happen. And that's not what it was. Here's what he said. He said, for there was not a needy person among them, for all who were owners of land, of houses, would sell them and bring the proceeds of the sales and lay them at the apostles' feet. You know what he's saying? You need to understand what the original church started out with. The original church started out with Jews and Gentiles. The Jewish people were taught how to save. The Gentiles were taught how to spend. That's all they knew, is how to spend. And so when they came into the church, there were multitudes of them that were hungry. They didn't know how to feed themselves or get food. And so when they came into the church, there were also widows and orphans. Widows were somebody in the family that did not have, because the Bible says if you were a woman under the age of 50 and your husband died, get remarried. If you were over the age of 50, you were not to get remarried. You would be a widow indeed. Well, you don't have a husband to take care of you. You're in the church, so it was the responsibility of the church, which is now your family, to take care of the widows. Orphans. What's an orphan? An orphan is someone who does not have a parent, a mother or a father. So someone had to take that child from the streets and take care of them. And so what did they do? They brought them into the church, and the church took care of them. If I had $50 and I only needed 30, then the other 20 went to help the orphans and the widows, while they taught others that were coming into the church how to save, how to understand that what you have is not yours. May I say this to you all? Not one penny that you got in your pocket is yours. Every bit of that belongs to God. It is given to us as a gift to use. Every bit of it. Now, so then what are you saying? That we give everything to the church? That is not what I'm saying. Anything far from it. I hear people all the time saying, I'm a brand new Christian, and the first thing I need to do is give 10% to the church. And so what do? They start giving 10% to the church, and all of their bills don't get paid. And so what do they look like in the community? Zippo. The Bible says that basically you make a commitment. If it's a quarter, you make a commitment that I'm going to give God a quarter. And watch how that quarter grows. Because why? You're not holding on to the grip. You're releasing it and understanding what it's supposed to do. This treasure chest. The first century church wasn't keeping treasure chests. They weren't storing things up for a rainy day. They were giving, and God was blessing in multitudes of ways. Okay? Now, again, for instance, here's where I'm coming from. Let's say there's a single mother in this church, And that single mother has a car that's broken down. Now, what is that single mother probably doing if she's got a job? Huh? She might be walking, but let's say her job is 10 miles away. Okay, she may be bumming a ride, or she may be riding a bus. So what is happening? They've got an extra expense now of a bus. So what they're saying is this, hold on a minute. If there is a single mother who's got a job, who's feeding or trying to feed her children, and the car's broke down, and you can't repair the car, and she doesn't have the money to repair the car, then maybe you should take some time to say, can I take you to your job? Can I give you a ride? Well, you don't understand. If I take her to my ride, then I'm going to miss my morning run. Really? No. Take your morning run earlier or later. It doesn't have to be at a standard time all of the time. Well, you don't understand. My personal trainer tells me that everything that I do has to be done at the right appropriate time, because if it isn't done at the right appropriate time, I'm not going to get the full effect of it. You're probably not going to get the full effect of it anyway. The problem, and this is what it is, this isn't talking about giving money. It isn't giving money. It's taking what God has given you with talents and other things to be able to use those talents to help people. You know, y'all got talents. I tell Dave and Mark and Jim, anytime something gets built around here, I will carry your tools. I will run and get whatever you need, but don't ask me to hammer a nail. Right? Not unless you want to put 3 nails where you could only have to drive 1. I used to have good hand-eye coordination when I was 10. And now it's hard because you've gotten old and you're wearing bifocals, and in order to read, you got to do this. What good is this? It sees far away. Well, good, this isn't far away, this is up close. But sometimes, this is what I'm talking about. Somebody needs someone to move something. Okay, you got the time to do it. Why don't you do it? It's helping one another out. For instance, there are some of you that have got gardens, and praise God, I love you all. Because in my homeowners association, in which we live, you are not allowed to have a garden in your yard. Your fences have to match appropriately the color of the fence around the pool or something else, and I got to pay money to live in that stinking place. Homeowners Association, don't ever go there. They're good for some things and not so good for other things. Okay? So what was I talking about? I had no clue. Gardening. Yes, that's what it was. Thank you. So my neighbor next door decided he's going to build a garden. So what he did was he got some concrete blocks and built him this elevated space. And he decided he was going to plant garden. So he did. He planted some garden. Okay? And it was legal. And nobody could say anything to him, and everything was fine. So he did. The problem is now he doesn't garden anymore. It grows weeds. Tall weeds. And they don't do anything about it. But sometimes there are things, and I've shared with you before that, for instance, there may be homeless people on the streets. And you can't help everybody. But there are certain needs that they have. And the point of, and here's what I'm saying. Most homeless people can't find something to eat. They can't. Somebody will either take them for a meal or give them just enough money to get a meal. But what a homeless person generally cannot find is toiletries. And you know what they need? They need a toothbrush. They need toothpaste. Because if they don't brush their teeth, it's going to go away. And they're going to get sick. And they can't seek medical help. So there's certain things that doesn't cost you anything. As a matter of fact, we can join with, I think it's called Care for Hope, right in Franklin. I shared it before, and I'll share it again because we'll get involved with it. And all we have to do is go there and help them. They take medical equipment that hospitals give to them that just basically need repair or cleaned up. And guess what they do with those? They give them to communities that maybe doesn't have an x-ray machine in their community. They go to other countries and they do that. So what do? You take a little bit of your time, you help them out, and then they actually will give you or let you take bags that you can carry in your car, and when you see a homeless person, you can give them a bag of toiletry. Doesn't cost you a dime. It just costs you a little bit of your time. Drive around the community and look for homeless people and hand out bags. Driving down the street, you're going to see them. They're everywhere. And people need to understand this. And so we need to understand that sometimes we need to understand that certain people, they do have needs. Understand that. And we all get to that place. The gentleman that was talking, he said he looked at his checkbook and he had $62 to do him and his wife for the rest of the week. And I think it was like Monday. $62, man, doesn't go very far if you've ever tried to stretch that much. And the last point is, where am I? Okay. The last point is to give it all away. Once the church understood and they ditched this mind stuff, no one ever had a need. Needs were always met. And so what he says in Acts chapter 4, verses 33 and 34, and with great power the apostles were giving testimony to the resurrection of the Lord Jesus. Abundant grace was upon them all, for there was not a needy person among them. Now, don't misunderstand me. There's times you're always going to need something, but that doesn't mean you're needy. Okay? Needy is basic necessities are not met. That's needy. Okay? Like I said before, you don't need cable, ladies and gentlemen. And in all honesty, you don't need a cell phone. They still have landlines. And those things are cool. Because when you walk out the door, you can't take it with you. And the greatest thing is, they can't give you that commercial, what are you carrying in your wallet? I've got my landline. It won't fit, and it doesn't go. So we need to understand that this is an awkward message. We've been talking about our love, our church, and understanding that this isn't that type of a message, okay? But we do have needs, and we're going to bring one of those up right now, because you see, this is the treasure chest, and I was going to use this for certain things, but this thing still has stuff in it, like suckers, chocolate, Smarties, I don't know, robin eggs, and all this stuff that my grandkids and Mark haven't eaten yet. Mark comes in every once in a while and gets a sucker, and I know that's not on his diet. And he'll come in and get one, and I'll ask him, I'll say, are you allowed to have that? And he'll try and tell me it doesn't have any carbs in it. I said, cool, that works for me. But here's the deal. One of the things that happens, there's two things that are happening right now, and that is this. School is about ready to start. And there are families in our church who has children. And if you've ever had to look at the expense of what school supplies are today, it's crazy. I was talking to my daughter, Charlie. She had to buy all of these books for RJ and Eli. $600 for the books for 1 year. And so it's saying, okay, so how can we, recover some of that, because they're being homeschooled and through Abeka. And I looked at the books that these things have got, and it's one of the things that I liked is they are actually teaching kids cursive writing, which they have quit doing in public schools today. And so kids don't need to know how to do that. But anyway, so we're talking, and then somebody else, we were talking, and they were talking about having to buy some school supplies for the kids, and it was like $71, and I know they don't have the $71, but they paid it anyway. And that wasn't for all of the school supplies. So here's the deal, and I do this, and most of y'all don't know, like I told you about the 5% that we do and for benevolence. I am a bargain shopper. And if anybody's around me, they know, and they think, oh man, this guy's a hoarder. No, I have probably, if you have a child that is in school and in this church, and you need help with school supplies, give me the list. And I will do my best to make sure you have your school supplies. Now, I'm not talking about buying clothes. Okay, I can't do that. Clothes are too expensive, and everything. And there's some other things that can go that way. There's that, and the church has got this stuff. If you ever want to see my treasure chest, come to this room. And I can't get everything in this room. My wife told me this yesterday. She came into the office and she said, "You are the worst hoarder I've ever seen." And I said, "This is stuff that I have bought that I needed space for, that I don't have room for." I've got pens, I've got pencils, I've got crayons, I've got markers, I've got a paper, I've got binders. I don't have enough for everybody, but I've got backpacks that I bought at the end of the last year, at the end of school year, when it's dirt cheap. We'll buy and we store up for this year. That's number one. Number two is, as many of y'all know, we do Awana in this church. Awana in this church is for the kids. And this year, we're doing it different than what we've been doing. And as I was talking with my wife, I said, there's some things we need to change because it is our responsibility to help teach these kids. Junior high and senior high kids need to know what they believe before they hit the streets. Awana is fun. It is, but it's more than fun. And for those of you that have volunteered, thank you so much. Thank you. That is part of giving. It's not costing you money. It's just costing you time. Time to pour into the heart of a child. But here's the problem. Many of these children that come to this, they need books. And they need a vest. And they can't afford that. Some are very cheap. Some are very expensive. But it's making them a part of everything that's there. And so we calculated how much it costs to basically sponsor a child for their vest and their handbook. Okay? And it's $40. Okay? And so Here's the part of saying there's people that have needs and we're going to give them. And so I have exactly $40 in my pocket and I'll be the first to give. This will be there as you go out. If you don't have the money and you want to write a check, you write it out to the church. If you don't have a check but you have a debit card, last screen, Mark, you can actually text to this number and it will come to the church. You got it? Are you up there? Okay. The number is 513. What's the rest of it? I'm sorry. You got it? It was the very last screen. It's not on there? The words won't pop up? Then do me a favor and bring up the PowerPoint off my drive. I love my church, week 4, and the very last one. Or you say, well, I don't have. What we're saying is this. This is helping the needs of these people. Okay? And it is our way of saying, this isn't mine, it's giving. Because may I say this to you, that the majority of children and families that are reached in this church, you know where it comes from? Awana. And these kids on Sunday night. As a matter of fact, let's play a game. When did you start Awana, Carol?
What?
When did you start Awana?
When?
When?
About 32, 33 years ago.
32, 33 years ago. When did you start it?
32 years.
About 32, 33 years ago. Let's see. Didn't you come to Awana?
Yep.
At Taylor's Grove?
Yep.
Yep.
And my brother.
And your brother?
Yep.
How many years ago?
Like 30 years ago, brother.
30 years ago?
Amen.
That's a life that was changed. And guess what? Because she was in Awana, guess what's happening? Her children are in Awana. We started Awana 30 years ago. Were you in Awana? Yes. Who's in Awana now? My grandkids. It's generational, ladies and gentlemen, and it trickles down. You want trickle-down economics? This is trickle down. This is showing how, and this is talking about loving by giving. And giving, again, it isn't all about money. These kids are learning scriptures. When a kid gets out of Journey this year, which is high school kids, it is 187. I think they will know 187 verses. Not just Jesus loves me, this I know. They're going to know what they believe and why they believe it. It becomes a thing. Here it is, the number 513-445-3437. And what you do is you got quotes, double quotes that you put in there, a $sign, and then the amount that you want to give, and end quote. If it doesn't work, let me know, and then I'll gladly take your money. We can work out ways to do it, and I can show you another way to do it. Okay? But it's a way to say thank you. That there are people who have needs, and God, we're going to help with those needs, whatever they are. And whatever I can do, then that's what I'm going to do. This, ladies and gentlemen, is loving by giving. It isn't always money. It's time, effort. There are sometimes these kids, man, we walk out of here and every one of us sometimes maybe want to pull out what hair we have, as long as we have some left from some of the kids that have pulled it out, you know. Or there are times you walk out of there just talking and crying. Did you hear what Susie said today? It breaks my heart. But we're making impacts. And this is all it is. Okay? Some of it is financial, some of it is not. But again, if you've got school supplies you need, give me your list. And then I'll get what I can get for you, and then I'll call you and you can come pick them up. Okay? It's the way the church helps. And we're good stewards. I can guarantee you that I get stuff that generally would cost $15 to $20 for sometimes $1. Sometimes I get them for 10 cents. Sometimes I get them for free. We work on the connections, okay? So this morning, let's stand.
Hello, this is Pastor Chuck Cotton from Calvary Baptist Church. First of all, I'd like to say thank you very much for taking the time out to either listen to our sermon or to watch it on video. We are grateful that you've actually taken the time and hope and pray that it has been a blessing to you as it was to us as we delivered it to our congregation. We ask if you have any questions whatsoever that you email us at pastorchuck@calvarybaptistmiddletown.org, or you could come in and give us a phone call, if you would please, at area code 513-423-7251. I'd like to take this opportunity to also invite you to come to our church and visit us, if you would please. We actually have small groups on Sunday morning starting at 9:30, with our morning worship following at 10:45. Prior to our morning small groups, we also provide donuts with coffee, milk, orange juice, a time for fellowship, get to know each other, have a good time before we actually break out into our small groups for Sunday. Our worship services are uplifting, they're fast moving, and everything in our service is just so fast paced. But we do take time every once in a while to slow down as we feel the Holy Spirit moving, and we never want to hinder it in any way. We also have on Sunday evening, during the school year, we have Awana, and Awana starts with the Puggles, actually from age 2 all the way up through high school. And during that period of time, we also have a worship service. Both of these start at 6 o'clock and end at 7:30. Our Wednesday night, we have a Bible study, which starts at 7. We generally finish about 8:15. We would love for you to come and visit with us. Don't have to dress up. Just come as you are, because to us, it doesn't matter. You're a child of God, a creation of His, and so to us, you're important to everything that we do. Our motto here is building the kingdom one life at a time, and we hope that we have a chance to visit with you, get to know you as you get to know us. So thank you, and may God bless you.